We continue to do a top 10 for the divisional era. That is 50 years, just above 50 years, 51, counting last year's shortened season. Bob Costas is with us. And Bob, I guess Pie Traynor is out of the equation now. So we've got him out of the way. Eddie Matthews, that sort of thing. And it does point out, this was kind of the divisional era, 1969 to the present. It is kind of a golden era, 70s and 80s for third baseman.
Yeah, it is. And while Pie Traynor and Eddie Matthews are not in the mix, there is one word of explanation that's needed. Brooks Robinson would be somewhere on the top 10 and perhaps in the top half of third baseman all time. But since we're talking about the divisional era, he won an MVP in '64. He won more of his Gold Gloves, the 16 Gold Gloves, prior to the divisional era than after. Now, admittedly, Brooks Robinson had his tour de force in the 1970 World Series for the Orioles against the Reds, but I was able to be comfortable with leaving Brooks Robinson off this list. If it was an all-time list, he's on it.
Right.
But divisional era on, he isn't. And looking at our respective lists, we're almost identical 1 through 6, but 7 through 10 is where we part company.
All right.
We each have Mike Schmidt in the first spot. Well, we'll go to mine. Schmidt, Brett, Chipper Jones, Wade Boggs, sometimes overlooked. After all, he won 5 batting titles and had a 162-game stretch in the mid-'80s, from midseason one year to midseason the next, where he hit over 400 for 162 consecutive games. Paul Molitor in the Hall of Fame. Adrian Beltre, terrific glove, power bat. Nolan Arenado putting together the kind of numbers that will justify his inclusion on this list, and no fall off yet. Scott Rowland, maybe some people would have preferred he stay around a bit longer to accumulate greater stats, but he won, I believe, 8 Gold Gloves and had a power bat. Bill Madlock almost never gets any props. He won 4 batting titles. There is no one with as many as 4 batting titles not in the Hall of Fame other than Bill Madlock. I'm not saying he should be in the Hall of Fame, but he is on my list. And Greg Nettles, if it wasn't for Brooks Robinson, there was a period of time when he would have been the best defensive third baseman in the American League, had a huge World Series in 1981, power bat, low batting average in a low batting average era by and large, but power bat.
We're on the same page in a lot of respects, Bob. I'm with you on Brooks Robinson. He wasn't peaking, from 1969 to 71, unlike, say, Willie McCovey, Carl Yastrzemski, even though his team was great. Obviously, the Orioles had that all-time great run, 69 to 71. So no Brooks Robinson. He's more of the expansion era, 1961. We're doing 1969. Mike Schmidt is the easy call at number 1 all-time or over the last 50 years. For me, we're very similar, Bob, in the top 5. Brett is just an all-time great. Wade Boggs is more properly appreciated now because he was an on-base champion and a batting champion. That's rare.
Yes.
He could do both, and he could field a bit. Chipper Jones was a marvelous offensive player. Paul Molitor is, now we both have him number 5, so we're both, I think, properly rating him. Just a fantastic player who's just, just kind of lost in the sauce a little bit. But he played different positions, known as a DH. But as a third baseman, he was fantastic. Now, 6 through 10, I think there's a real fall-off. There was for me, Bob. Adrian Beltre, obviously great season. Scott Rowland didn't have the volume, but I think he's a Hall of Famer. Then you get to the players just below where I would have Hall of Fame level. Greg Nettles, I think, deserves to get in there. Nettles, for his peak, which is a 12-year run, was a 5-win player. David Wright, again, for a shorter period of time, but we're talking about peak players for an 8-year period. He was a 5-win player, a 138 OPS plus, and he was in the mix for best players in baseball. I'm not saying he was the best, but he was in that mix. So I think his peak was high enough. And I just wanted to do it, Bob. I wanted to get the Penguin in there, Ron Cey, because he's criminally underrated. Cey, for his peak, like 73 to 82, was a 5-win player. He was a very good hitter. Obviously, there were bigger stars around him, but it came down to, for me, Buddy Bell or Ron Cey. Bell was a tremendous defensive player. I struggle with that.
Legitimate points all, and I'm glad that the Penguin gets some love. And in addition to everything else about George Brett, what a great postseason performer he was on top of all of it. So at number 2, no disgrace being number 2 behind Mike Schmidt, who's actually the greatest third baseman of all time. Not just of the divisional era, but of all time.
And Brett is, I throw this at you, was a winner, right? There was a fierceness to George Brett. Brett got after you, and it probably, his skills, contact skills, power skills all around. But yeah, he was a driving, winning force, and I know that's sort of an intangible, but he also obviously has the tangible. So I have him a solid number 2, and to have him above Wade Boggs takes a lot for me. We're talking Boggs with an insane on-base percentage, and really a one-of-a-kind in baseball history. By the way, I won't even hold the batting titles, and kids, he means batting average leaders by batting champion. Bill Madlock, I'm glad you got Bill Madlock in. I missed the boat on that. He had a 129 OPS plus for his 11, 10-year period, his best years. And he has a 3.5 WAR over that period, which is not, comparable to, say, Buddy Bell or Greg Nettles. But you know what? I'll say this. I know he wasn't great with the glove, but retroactive defensive metrics are dicey. Bob, I'll grant you that. So I think you did a good thing. I'm glad I got Ron Sayan, and I'm glad you got Bill Madlock in, because he's certainly in that conversation.
And I'm big. Chris Russo is the same way. I'm big on the bold type in Baseball Reference, or back in the old days, the Baseball Encyclopedia. And when you've got 4 batting titles, that counts for something. Even if it's an old school consideration, counts for something.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'd rather have on base, but I'd rather have a high batting average within that on base. Your thoughts on Arenado getting an active player in there, even with only, 5-6 years?
There may be a little bit of an attempt on my part to get active players in there so people don't say, hey, you're leaning too heavily on the past. There are a lot of active players who would belong on this list a few years down the road, and I'm guessing that Arenado would be one of them.
I think 8 years in all. I mean, his peak years so far. I mean, maybe it's kind of 6. I don't have it in front of me now. But right, he's certainly projecting. And the glove plays. I bring that up with Scott Rowland, that Rowland was compared to Brooks Robinson. Like, if you can really, you have to be great to even invoke the name Brooks Robinson. But Rowland was, and I think this current crop of Manny Machado, Nolan Arenado, I think these guys actually deserve to be in that consideration. So we're seeing all-time great third base play in the field right now.
Yes, we are. But the last few names you mentioned, luckily, not enough volume yet for us to consider them. These decisions are hard enough as it is.